education, etc. And some have global value, say the value of carbon. And I mean, there's 20, when Hal and I and others did the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, we looked at 25 services. We didn't value all of them, but some have very local value, some have more national value, some have regional value, some have global. The negotiations on things like RED will indeed put a global value on the carbon content, which I think is only one value of an assistant. So there's nothing inherently, I don't see there's anything inherently broken in an economic system that doesn't allow developing countries through processes like RED and RED Plus, which I think are the major negotiations at the moment, to capture that value, especially with now the power of the combination of the BRIC countries alone, let alone adding Indonesia to it. But I mean, the power base now is very different in the international negotiations than what it was 20, 30 years ago. Totally transformed.
But biodiversity is not only for climate change, for carbon.
But that's what I'm saying.
For genetics, the genes.
But that's what I'm saying. Some of it has local value, such as pollination services, nothing to do with global value, it's a local value. Some of the medicinal plants will be local. So that's what I'm saying. Biodiversity has value at all different spatial scales, and the question is, how do you capture it?
Do we know in advance which one has a global benefit, local, national? We don't know much about biodiversity. Rice, when there was a crisis, it was safe, but the genes of Uttar Pradesh rice in Uttar Pradesh, India. So unrelated and so on. I mean, to say in advance that biodiversity separation, local, national, global, beforehand, I think it takes too far. And I have a feeling that we don't know much about biodiversity. So that even with food, there may be, that's why I was talking about food diversity, that we can exploit the biodiversity of various respective national countries to save the world for food. But I think it has a humanity value, this biodiversity.
And there is a dynamic dimension of this as well. And that is that if we are talking about any impact, you may attempt to calculate the value of that in economic terms. But when we look at sustainability-related impacts, it means that we lose more and more biodiversity. And the cost for that escalates to infinity, because we will lose everything if we lose that last species. And this is in particular, since we can't foresee which of the species are most essential and so forth for the ecological web. And that can be stated that as long as we continue to degrade biodiversity, that cost will escalate to infinity. Then we don't need to engage in various efforts to calculate the exact cost for this or that loss, because they are all flawed up front. I sent you a paper about that just recently, Bob.
Well, aren't we interested in a political decision in Rio? If we are, then we have to write a political language. We can't use the scientific language.
But what political language are you looking for?
We're looking for some consensus in this, that there is a problem here, that politicians have to come to a decision. There has to be a decision, and it's not the scientists and you and I who are going to take this. It's going to be someone at a political level who's going to have to decide.
What, the decision on what?
But what do you want a decision on beyond Nagoya? I mean, that was a major step forward in Nagoya. What do you want beyond Nagoya on access and benefit sharing? It set the framework up for exactly this thing. I mean, we mustn't be naive and make some political statements and show our naivety. Are we being critical of the agreement in Nagoya? I mean, that's the question.
But is it naive to say that all our resolutions since 1992, 2002, is very heavily on science, but it lacks this political color and therefore not feasible?
Okay, let me ask you then. I'm not an expert on the agreement in Nagoya on access and benefit sharing. As I understand it, it is, and Will and others probably know this better than me, it set up the mechanism so developing countries can appropriate the value of their resources when used. So, haven't we actually got what you want through Nagoya?
No. First, we start with telling The world can be saved, climate change, forestry, biology, and so on. Point one. We need a different economy, green economy. Point two. We need this through a higher value added. Point three. The question now becomes, when you have a market failure, when you have a discrepancy between the strength of country A and B, how can the country that owns this green natural resource be able to raise the value added and therefore make a benefit for the green economy of the globe? That is the issue.
It's a combination of joint ventures, as Jose said.
Merck experience in Brazil is not being imitated in other countries. Why?
Emil, this is what China is doing. China is doing the same
Exactly.
thing. Look, let me.
Look, the big countries have a leverage,
Yeah.
and therefore Brazil and China can afford. But Vietnam, Burma, and all the other countries who don't have a leverage against Merck with the US backing, what can they do?
We are talking for the small
Well,
countries.
what's happening is exactly what you said would happen if we had this as an open discussion. We would get to an issue and we couldn't move forward. We have a lot of things in this document. I think that you ought to write
He is going to write.
a little section there, and then we'll bring it for discussion, but not that we can't debate it at, for an hour here.
I mean, you, after all, you have the section
Yes, I
that
know.
is here as a
Which we have
draft.
written,
And
yeah.
it's been there from the beginning.
Yeah. Toy with. I don't think we should be too, we should recognize the serious limitations of GDP as a measure of economic growth and complement it with measures of.
So this, in fact, I like the word serious there. Put the words in the first line before limitations, put serious. So at least let's,
That's good.
yeah. And
We could put the bolding quote right here. Anybody who thinks that the economy, a finite planet can grow forever.
Can you mention the gross national happiness idea? And even France is trying to use this,
But
gross national happiness.
these are supposed to be bullet points. I'm worried about their length.
it's already getting long. You're saying environmental externality. I mean, most politicians would know what we mean by environmental externalities. We can rephrase it, say, the social cost, the economic and social cost of environmental degradation should be internalised. I mean, that's what it means.
Do we need
Are you happy
sustainable
with that, Dr. Singh?
in front of
Are you happy
economic?
with that?
According to Nicholas, I'm just reflecting what he said yesterday, we should get out of that and call it bad, respective good economics. And what we are doing today, unsustainable, is just bad economics. Do we need it? It's just a question. Or could we just say as a measure of economic growth?
Okay, get rid of sustainable.
I agree. Bullet balloons, not bullet points.
No, but I mean, they're only 2 to 3 sentences, which I think is fine. If they're too terse, people aren't going to understand them at all.
But they will ask questions,
That's fine, yeah.
If you have it terse, then people will ask what do you mean by that, and then you can explain it, but rather than explain the whole
And the
thing.
longer paper should explain all of this, obviously, that's the key point.
Exactly.
But the fundamental problem is the emphasis on growth. It's a building thing, even among economists, that realize that. And compared to that, the very serious problem with subsidies is trivial. In other words, the subsidies are distorting, they're bad. Almost every economist I know agrees that you can get rid of all subsidies, it would be a net benefit.
Oh, I don't agree.
As long as you think you can grow at 3.5%
I don't
a year,
agree.
or 5%
If you are
a year.
talking about the people living below the poverty line of $1 a day, you need a subsidy element, period. So sorry, I don't agree with you. The business solution is not the answer globally. No. Let's
accept
agree to
that.
disagree, but I don't agree. If you're talking about the people who are living in the poorest of the poor, living on less than $1 a day and a survival thing, a business solution is not the answer.
Could
There has to be an element of subsidy.
I ask a question though?
Yeah, sure.
Would it be okay after IG to add in areas such as, because then you have environmentally damaging subsidies, for instance, in areas such.
Sure.
Then you don't
No
claim
problem.
that every subsidy to
problem.
energy, okay, that would be okay then,
Yeah,
okay. In areas such, and then we have cracked the problem.
But isn't the issue on growth here is the global economy cannot however you measure it, cannot continue to grow. There's a finite system.
There should be
on the
no
planet.
growth in
And-
rich countries.
And,
period.
and we have to set against that there are billions in poverty where there has to be growth. And so I think the problem with this bullet at the moment is it's actually nothing really controversial there. This is all stuff that's been agreed at
Agreed.
intergovernmental meetings.
Yeah.
And it's actually tinkering, to some extent, with a economic system that is still hell-bent on growth.
Hell-bent on growth. The two terms that are just awful is to get rid of the two things. You've got to get rid of the idea that growth is good in rich countries, and you've got to insert into it that there's going to have to be some form of redistribution, certainly redistribution of access to power and resources. Otherwise, it ain't going to work. The one thing that's interesting, this whole discussion, nobody's brought up the footprint analysis. Nobody's ever, there aren't problems with them, but they basically all say the same thing. You require 1.5 Earths to be sustainable, roughly, at today's level of disparity.
Well, maybe,
More than that.
maybe we find a way,
Things.
without getting
Yeah.
too black and white. How about the following, maybe? In the first sentence, Ivy, let me try something and see. We must get the economic system right and recognise, let's see if it works, it may not work, and recognise that uncontrolled economic growth is unsustainable in a finite planet.
That's what I mean,
Something like that.
That's better, because then economic growth could happen in some way.
Yeah.
And I like that better.
yeah. It has to in some places.
Yeah,
In a finite planet.
and it could happen here as well if we increase the value.
So what do you eliminate the whole thing after that?
No, and then leave the rest as well. It's long, but I think that most of this issue is, most of this issue is looking at the economic issues, basically. It's an issue in biodiversity, it's an issue in food, it's an issue in energy. I have no problem personally with a pretty strong, long bullet on the economic issues.
It's a fundamental one in many ways.
It's really very fundamental.
I think we should stop at economic growth, full stop, and then go to environmentally damaged subsidies in areas such as.
But the problem is that all economists and ministers of the economy, finance ministers, have this whole issue of GDP.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we want to offer an alternative, like a gross national happiness cycle.
Well,
What's wrong with
no,
that?
but there's one here, the 4 forms of capital.
Yeah.
So you bring in the value of natural capital, you bring in the value of social capital and human capital.
And it's in the world twice. It took around 40 years each time. And each time, that change was preceded by heavy resistance about those with the largest vested interests. And eventually the paradigm shift occurred. And it was through role models that eventually became policy, and eventually the paradigm shift occurred.
Okay, then the problem is, how do we accelerate the 40 years?
Yeah,
We don't
yeah,
have
we don't
40
have
years for some of these.
By providing governance models and economic systems that empower the proactive role models and design the policies with regard to what they need.
Well, that's a good section to write then, something like that.
I'm going to sell my horse collar stock.
Okay, so I think to a first approximation, we have not come up with major changes in the structure here, clearly. We've certainly identified how we can make it flow better, which is good. We've identified where we've got some real weaknesses, and that is in our discussion of the economics, how the GDP is a flawed concept. So we need to look at things like externalities, subsidies, valuation of ecosystem services, etc. Broader metrics of human well-being. So clearly that part can really be improved. The true integration between the economic, social, and environmental can clearly be stressed and must be stressed. Needs something on adaptation, which Celine is actually writing. Clearly want some good case studies of where things have worked at the local or regional global level. I mean, we can point out that we have to be very careful when we do them, that we think these are give the solutions. We can point out that there has been in a few cases regional or global action, i.e. the best example of a global action where you can get some learning but not too much is stratospheric ozone depletion, but don't take it too far. some very good examples of regional action, acid deposition in Europe or North America. So we can actually point out, and then of course there's the much more local actions, which Bunker has got some very good examples of. So I think we can point out where we've had actions at different levels, but not draw too many, but must be very careful to not to draw simplistic conclusions, which is what a few people were trying to do last week in Antarctica on relating smoking and climate change or ozone depletion
My
and
gosh,
climate
who
change.
was on this boat?
Oh, a lot of people, and that is, well, one of the major things was effectively how to stimulate the move away from fossil fuels, and it was how did we actually get people off smoking? What actually worked in America? And what we learned is just our facts versus their facts, that they being the tobacco industry, actually didn't really work very much, basically. One had to effectively, in the end it was partly humour, where some of their adverts were so patently ridiculous, one actually attacked their ads against them, basically, like doctors smoke cigarettes, and most doctors smoke Camels. Yes, maybe if doctors did smoke, it was Camels, but it was only 1% of the doctors were smoking it. It wasn't all doctors smoked. So they actually used an inverse psychology on a lot of the very, very big television adverts. So we were trying to learn last week what worked in the anti-smoking campaign. Where is it potentially relevant? I.e., one of the huge adverts now on clean coal. Clean coal? And so, in other words, they're going to try a whole series of very expensive campaigns to show clean coal, and then show the absurdity of the term clean coal, same as safe smoking. So, some of the discussion was last week was how can you actually come up with a very effective campaign, almost to belittle the advertising of some of these.
Which is a beautiful example of what we're talking about. I'd just like to add one thing. That it was not one single campaign that eventually cracked it. It was not one single document.
No,
it was repeating over and over again.
Yeah.
It was good, solid science going into it. Royal College of Physicians did a beautiful book, which was called Smoking or Health, where they trashed the tobacco industry's arguments and so forth and so on. And eventually it happened by continuously repeating it.
But it had a
Now,
public or kind
and just one more issue, Paul. When you then look at what knowledge did to this, because many people hesitate that it is knowledge is about how we package it. But if you look through the whole social system, the people who know most about smoking are the ones that smoke the least. So we have almost no smokers amongst cancer scientists, lung physicians. The general practitioners smoke more, but less than the general public. Nurses smoke more, and so forth. So all through the society, it's a knowledge issue.
Yeah,
which is a good footnote.
I have one experience you never had. I was a smoker, and I was a smoker in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And I was picking up butts on the street. I was 7 or 8. I picked up butts on the street and smoked them because it seemed very adult. If you've seen them, no. But the interesting thing is that's why I say there was a different knowledge base than say climate change. We called them coffin nails. None of my 7 or 8 or 9-year-old friends who were smoking thought it was good for you. It made you seem adult. I don't think anybody, anytime these people sued the tobacco companies because they didn't realize it was bad for them, I think it's bullshit.
I agree with you on that.
I mean,
absolutely.
I smoked just like I drink because it was very pleasurable, but wasn't doing any cost-benefit analysis. I'm sure I was going to die younger. But what the hell, when you're 7 years old? You know?
And it's a pleasure to smoke fossil fuels as well. I mean, that's pleasure, right? And knowledge keeps growing.
No, I'm just saying for climate change, they have to do more subtle things. The average person isn't walking around thinking that climate change is going to harm them before they've ever heard anything more about it.
There are other examples, when did we all start using seatbelts? All of a sudden, we didn't. But Bob, I want to say something else too, in terms of a good example. You don't mention IPCC at all in your paper, and yet IPBS you mentioned. And I still think that, I don't know why, but I still think that, the bringing together people from different communities and teaching them to speak to each other, we're very hopeful about IPBS, right? We've been fighting for it for 10 years, but, so that is a good example, and there are some local.
I think there should be a very short section in here about the importance of the knowledge and assess knowledge. That while we have a lot of information and a lot of knowledge, and it's not a lack of knowledge that would stop us acting better, new knowledge additional knowledge,
Yeah.
and we can even put a few of the key
Yeah,
areas
right.
without a laundry list,
Right.
valuable, but getting the knowledge assessed in an multidisciplinary way,
Exactly.
and how we move to transdisciplinary research
Right.
when we